So I'm going to jump right in and do what I feel most comfortable doing, which is sharing stories. That's the thing that I relate to stories. They just they speak to me. When I hear somebody share a story, to me, one of the most amazing things is if you look at the things that we have in the scriptures about the words of Jesus, almost the majority of it comes down to Jesus sharing stories. And essentially, when you read these stories, you can, and I don't want to stray too far off topic here, but the concept goes way back thousands of years in telling a story. And the Greeks had a concept, they would say, that was mimesis. And I think Aristotle formulated this idea that when you look around the world around you, what is the one thing that you can never see? The one thing that you can never see looking around, no matter where you look, is yourself. And so mimesis is a Greek word for mirror. And what he would say is, through storytelling, you can see yourself in the story. And that's why, like if you watch Old Yeller, you cry when Travis has to put his dog down, because you're like, oh, if that was my dog, you know. So something about inserting yourself into the story causes you to see yourself there. And that's why I think Jesus' stories were so effective, is you could go, I was that lost sheep. I was that widow that gave everything. I tried so hard, or I was the prodigal son. I mean, each one of those stories, or there's been times I looked at it and thought I was the older brother. I've been judgmental of people that were coming back to the Lord, and I'm like, yeah, they haven't really done due diligence, you know. And I've been the father even. I've seen myself at times wanting to receive somebody back and thinking, oh, if things would please go the way that, you know, there could be restoration here. So that's the value of story. And so I'm just going to dive right on in, and we can make with it, you know, we can see where it lands. And if it works, great. And if not, you can just say it was discouraging. Your gut was right 4 years ago. So picture this. Here I am. And I'm going out into the wild unknown, and I've got my faithful partner with me, Prince Valiant, and we're going out to the wilderness of my backyard in San Gabriel, California, in 1973. This is probably 72, somewhere in there. And we go out there, and we were fighting evil and having all kinds of wonderful things. And Prince Valiant was my collie, and I called him Val. I'm like, Val, come on. So Val was not really as young as I was. He was older, and so he probably couldn't do all the things that I wanted him to do, but he tried, and we went on all kinds of adventures together. We were very close, and it's horrible. I feel so bad for Will and Jada, because being a preacher's kid is the worst thing ever. It is not cool. And so my dad, my sympathies toward you, but my dad gets, you know, there was a church plant that was going to start in Denver. And so we packed up and moved with a bunch of other people to Denver, and we're going to start working for the Lord in Denver. And they told me, we can't take Val with us. We have to leave him back in California. And so it broke my heart as a 5-year-old. And but they promised me, we're going to get to see him again. We're going to get to go back and everything. And so we weren't in Denver, but, you know, a few weeks. And I remember laying in my bed in my new apartment, and I hear the phone ring, and I hear my mom on the phone, and she's gasped, and she says, somebody shot Val. And so we never knew who did it, but somebody shot our dog and killed him while I was gone. And so I was so saddened and just heartbroken that, you know, and I began to really feel this anxiety. I remember the first time, I think, in my life that I can remember feeling doubt and feeling anxiety and fear. And, you know, if you want to call a 5-year-old having depression, it was just something that I was like, it just smote my heart. And I was like, and so I remember my parents soothing me and saying, it's okay, it's going to be all right. And, you know, I got over it, and we went on. And eventually we moved back to Southern California. Fast forward another 5 or 6 years, and my dad gets a call to pastor a church in Paducah, Kentucky. So we go back there, and things did not go well for me. I was a very troubled young man, and he was tied up with ministerial stuff, as so often, pastors and preachers do. And so I was excited about coming back to California after being there about 2 years. I thought it was a great opportunity to come back, but I had been missing my friends for 2 years. I had been thinking, oh, when I get back to California, all my friends, everything's gonna be just like it was when we left. Well, over the last 2 years, all of my friends had made new connections. They had gone to new schools. They had reestablished relationships. So I got back and I was kind of at a loss because I wasn't connecting with people. And so I kind of got bullied in school. I got picked on a little bit, and it was, not a little bit, a lot. And it was really a rough period of my life. I was probably about 13 at the time, 12, 13, somewhere in there. I guess it was 13. And so there was this is one of those times that, so I doubted my parents, and I doubted some people that loved me, but we got to school, and one day, I got beat up on a regular basis, but I remember going into the bathrooms at Ramona Junior High, and there was this kid in there named Robert Gregorio that was mentally handicapped, and he was special needs pretty severely, and these boys that were constantly picking on me came into the bathroom, and they started picking on Robert, and something inside me was cringing, but part of me wanted to be accepted, and part of me wanted so bad to fit in that I joined in with him and started picking on him and was poking fun at him, being mean. And so we got done with it, it got broke up. He went on and went back to the office. And when I was done there, I felt so bad that I just left school. I didn't even go back to my class. I just left and went home. And both my parents were working at the time, and I just remember going in my backyard and just crying, just sobbing, because I felt so guilty, and I felt this doubt and this disappointment in myself. I was doubting my own ethics, at that young age, I was really realizing I had failed at something that was really important to me, and especially since I have a younger brother that's mentally handicapped, it compounded it even more. I was just thinking, how can I exist? And I didn't have anybody soothe me that time. That's something I just carried with me for years. I didn't even remember it until I was going to college in 2011, and I was, writing down some things. And sometimes writing is therapeutic. I started writing some memories, and this popped out, and I was like, oh my goodness, I never made that right. But it opened up a really big wound that I had never really dealt with. And so, fast forward a few more years. I'm a young married man. I'm driving home from work one night. Things were finally starting to take a good turn with my career. And I wasn't doing anything wrong. I had my phone on speakerphone, but I was paying attention to the road. And all of a sudden, the trucks in front of me, the diesels, about 10 o'clock at night, started swerving. And next thing I knew, a diesel hit me from behind. Not my fault. But he totaled out my car, broke my back. I didn't know that at the time. He pulled off to the side of the road, and so I was completely dazed and confused, got out of the car, and ran over to the side of the road. I was waiting for cops or something. I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I didn't realize I was in shock. But I walked over to the side, I crossed the freeway in that condition, and when I got over to the other side of the road, nobody would stop and help me. I was trying to flag somebody, nobody would stop, and the diesel took off. So I'm on the side of the road with nobody wants to stop and help me in the middle of the night. I didn't know I had a broken back. And later on, I found out, it was a very painful process. I had to get injections in my back. I had to go to therapy. I had all kinds of problems. And I know if I would have just gotten that license plate number, I could have got some kind of settlement to cover all my medical bills at least. And I had just hired on at a new job. I lost the job I was taking on. It was a comedy of errors. And I found myself doubting God. So I began really dealing with this anxiety and this depression. So I began noticing a pattern here. At first I was doubting some people that loved me. And then I was doubting myself. And then later on in life, it was manifesting in me doubting God. And I think that's a natural progression. We as humans want to fit in. We have this desire to And I don't know what it is about the spirit of elitism that is so common. Go my team. Go. You got to come to my church. You know, if you're a trumpet player, you got to play trumpet. You got to play guitar. You got to play. You identify with your crowd. You know, it's got to be my kind of music. And I don't know that there's anything inherently wrong in having some of that. But the bottom line is, sometimes it can be very unhealthy if you start giving into that, and you actually start ostracizing people. So here's what I found is, I began studying the scriptures. And the scriptures, when I read them, I read in the King James because I like Elizabethan language. I like Shakespeare. And I thought of this story. You may or may not be familiar with the story of Othello. But so I'll give you just in a nutshell one of the characters in there. Othello is this king. He's got a faithful, loyal wife. And he's got this one guy named Iago. And Iago is like the most corrupt character ever. He's worse than Voldemort. He's worse than, you know, Darth Vader. He's worse than all these characters because he's just inherently evil, and he does it for no reason. And he starts sowing these seeds in Othello's mind, saying, your wife's cheating on you. Your wife's unfaithful. Your wife is not somebody you can trust. Your wife's out to get you. And he keeps doing it to the point where Othello is going crazy, and he ends up taking his wife's life. He chokes her. And there's no payoff for Iago. Anyway, I said that to say that this was a seed of doubt that Shakespeare was identifying hundreds of years ago, that all of us are subject to falling prey to doubt. And there's many stories in the Bible about doubt, and I've studied the Bible. I'm not a theologian, but I'm very well versed in the scriptures in that I'm familiar with the concepts, and I wouldn't consider myself a novice. I know my way around, and I understand there's a lot of complex things in the Bible. And I've talked to some people that were brilliant scholars that have multiple doctorates in theology, and they don't agree on basic spiritual principles. So you've got two guys, and one believes in sprinkling, one believes in, immersion. And they both have a doctorate. They've spent 50, 60, 70 years in high-level education, and they cannot agree on the text. We've seen that with rabbis. I'm sure Todd could attest to this. You've got rabbis who studying texts that go back hundreds of years and even thousands of years, and they don't agree. So they're like, how can two people that are so smart not agree? And then we, as a common layperson, we are expected to understand these complexities in God. So I have my whole life been a skeptic in some respects. And I tend to, if somebody already says, hey, let's do this thing, or I'm always like, well, what's the real, I don't want to be cynical, and I don't want to be a pessimist, but I am very skeptical. And so when somebody comes out with something, I usually am looking for the flaw in it. And so here's the problem. We as Christians and as a society tend to want to identify with not doubting, with not giving into. So we deal with anxiety, we deal with depression, we deal with frustration, and all of these things that will come at us full force, and we don't share it with anybody because we're afraid. And the Bible gives us numerous verses on fear. And I was given this illustration once, and it's I've been told that poets love the English language because it's so elastic. There's words that can be used, love would be a great example. I love my dog, I love fried eggs, I love my wife, I love to go swimming at the beach in the summer. Well, those are all radically different things I love, but in Greek, in the Greek language, you had a specific word for each area of love. But in the English language, you can just use love universally across the board. Well, that happens when you start reading the text. And so when we deal with doubts and fears and anxiety, we have to start looking back. What is the cause of that? What is causing me to feel this fear? And if I'm scared of the boogeyman in the closet or scared of the monster under my bed, that's a false fear. That's not an accurate fear. Now, if I'm afraid of getting hit by a car walking across the freeway, that's a valid fear. That's a healthy respect for something serious. So the Word of God repeatedly tells us that, fear not. You hear all these stories of the angels and these people interacting with God, and he says, fear not. That's the scared kind of fear. That's where something is not really going to hurt you. It's the boogeyman in the closet. And so you're scared of something that's not really something to be afraid of. But there is a time where it says, fear the Lord your God. There is a time that it says, be afraid. And that is a healthy fear. That's a respect, and that's an honor that you would share with God. But we have taken questioning God and questioning his plans for us as being a healthy fear, and sometimes that's something that we should not be freaked out about. We need to say, I don't understand your plan for me, God. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. I don't know why some child like Graham Wolf deals with cancer and then is taken at the young age of 10, something like that, 11. I don't know why somebody that is healthy and vibrant is snuffed out. I don't know why somebody has a financial collapse that was totally unrelated to them. I don't know why. And people come in and they say, well, it's God's plan. And that's good and well when it's not you. But when you're going through absolute tragedy and things are going really bad and somebody says, it's okay, it's God's plan. I'm like, well, yeah, you go do it through God's plan right now. Anyway, what happens is we have an unhealthy fear that takes over our mind. And when that happens, we give into doubt. And we give into the wrong kind of doubt. But there's a healthy doubt, and that's what I was going to jump in. This is where I may need to rapid fire. I don't think, if you guys are doubters, Kaylee has a list that she can share with you. Or Kylie, I'm sorry, I knew it was Kaylee. My niece's name is Kaylee. But Kylie has a list that she can share of scriptures. So I can go back through it, but I'm just going to talk to you real quick about some of these folks that we all know from the scriptures that had a real challenge in believing the right thing. So fear and doubt, people talk about doubt and faith synonymous, and they talk about doubt and possibly truth, and doubt and belief system, doubt and hope. But what I would like to contrast is doubt and love, because that's really where things change. And so here's some of the verbs for doubt are fear, doubt, beguilement, let's see here, to call into question the truth of something or to be uncertain. He doubts everyone's word, or to lack confidence, to distrust, or to consider unlikely. But then as a noun, it can be used in uncertainty or disbelief of a opinion, deliberate suspension of judgment, a state of affairs. So doubt's an elastic word, and it's given in the scriptures in all those contexts. So here's what happens. If you look at this man that went to Jesus, it's in Matthew, he was a leper, and he said, I believe that you can heal me, but help me with my unbelief. I believe you can do it. And he said, if thou wilt. And the key word that jumped out at me is Jesus responded to him and said, I will. So Jesus didn't slap him around for saying, I'm having a hard time believing. Jesus gave him a soothing word and said, hey, I'm going to help you. And he did. We can jump over to Acts 17, and you got Paul and Silas who go into Berea, and they're preaching. And it says that the Bereans were more noble than the Thessalonians because they sought the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. So Paul and Silas were preaching to him, and they're like, where is that? Book, chapter, verse. I don't believe that. Show me where that's at. And when they showed them, they're like, oh, wow, the Bible does say that. And they believed. But they wouldn't have challenged it if they didn't have doubts. Doubts are not unhealthy in and of themselves. There is a healthy doubt that we can have, and we can go to God and say, I don't understand, God. You've got to help me with this because I don't get it. And we need to understand why some doubts are healthy and some doubts are unhealthy to have. And so we can jump over to Matthew. Jesus called the little children unto him and said, suffer them to come unto me. And the disciples were fighting him, and he laid hands on them and said, you don't understand the kingdom. The disciples were doubting what Jesus was doing. They were challenging him, saying, oh, he doesn't have time for these little guys. And Jesus pulled something out of there and said, you've got to become like little children. You don't understand what we're working with here. And I'm going to just rapid fire through these, but my point is, all of these people are people that had a very valid doubt and question about God. And so we should not only have times that we faithfully look to, hey, God, what are you doing? But we should also, when somebody comes in and says, I don't believe in God, when somebody comes in and says, I don't believe in the Bible, that could be a very healthy doubt. We don't need to dismiss that person and say, well, you just got to have faith, brother. That's all you got to. That may be the wrong answer. We need to give some consideration that somebody may have a very valid reason for not believing. They may have been exposed to all kinds of horrific things that would cause them to not trust God and not trust leadership and not trust a man. And just like me, when I was a kid, I doubted my parents. I doubted myself. I was doubting God. That's a very limited, myopic little insight into my life. But the bottom line is, that was a progression that led me to a point where I had to come to grips with, God, what do you have for me? What are you doing? Are you real? Do you really interact with people the way I think you do, or the way I thought you have in the past? And so if you look at Mark 9, there's a multitude there, and they say, hey, my son's got a dumb spirit, and Jesus is talking to them, and again, this guy says, I believe, help my unbelief. In Thomas, we all know the story of doubting Thomas. Thomas, the disciples come to him and say, Thomas, he's risen, everything's good. He said, unless I see the nail-scarred hands, unless I put my finger in the hole, I'm not going to believe it. And we always kind of make fun of Thomas, but Thomas is kind of one of my heroes, because to me, I can relate to that. Show me the money. I want to see what's going on here. Don't just tell me what's going on, because here's the reality for me. I've been duped a lot of times. I've had people tell me something and then find out later it wasn't true at all. And if that's the case, did Jesus rebuke these people though? When Thomas, he said, oh, blessed are those who haven't seen, Thomas. But the bottom line is, he said, feel the holes. Yeah. I'm the guy. I'm here to help you, Thomas. He gave Thomas some validation. If you scoot over to John 20, or let's see, we just did that with Thomas. If you Luke 7, John the Baptist. So Jesus told his disciples that no greater man had lived up to that point to John the Baptist. He was the pinnacle. So there may have been people that were equal to, but there was nobody that was greater than him prior to introducing the kingdom of heaven there. Whatever that means, you can duke it out. But the bottom line is, John the Baptist was the man. He knew what was going on. He recognized Christ. He was a voice in the wilderness crying out. He was announcing Jesus. He got down in front of Jesus and said, I'm not worthy to unloose your shoes. I'm not. And so he clearly was making a statement saying, Jesus, you're the Messiah. And yet, here he is in jail. He's about to die. He's getting ready to get his head cut off. And it looks like he's starting to doubt. His faith is wavering. And these disciples come over to him, he's like, would you go back to Jesus and ask him if he's the one, or is there going to be somebody that comes after him? And so did Jesus slap him around and say, John, what in the world? You're the guy who baptized me. Why would you doubt this? No, he didn't. He said, go back, tell John the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame are walking, and the dead are raised to life. He encouraged him. He validated these doubts. He validated these fears. And they were valid fears. Otherwise, he wouldn't have validated them. He wanted John to know, this is okay for you to feel this way. I've got you covered. And so, we could just go on and on. There's just story after story. Peter, when he went to Jesus and he said, Jesus said, I got to wash your feet. He's like, no, you're not going to wash me. And he's like, no, you're not going to be part of me unless you let me wash you. He's like, okay, then wash all of me. Peter was trying to say, I know better than you, Jesus. You don't need to wash me. I need to wash your feet. And Jesus was, so here's Peter, and again, we can identify with Peter a lot of times because he doubted on the water when Jesus called him. If you're really him, call me. He got out of the boat and started walking. But then what happened? Doubt, fear entered in. he started sinking. Did Jesus entirely rebuke him? No. He pulled him out of his situation. He gave him some encouragement. You've got, here's the kicker. So Jesus is praying in the garden. And he says, if this cup can pass from me, I don't want to drink from this cup. It sounds to me, you can interpret it how you want, and literarians have argued over this before, but the bottom line is it sounds like he's saying, I don't want to do this. I think, is it possible that you're wrong, God? Because this doesn't sound like a good plan for me right now. Can you do something to fix this? And God evidently either answered him, or sometimes God doesn't always answer us. I heard that God either says us go, grow, or no. So, but he doesn't always answer us. When you get that grow, it's like, what do you want me to do? I'm not gonna, and God doesn't always answer me. And when he does answer me, it's not always the answer I want. It's usually something I'm like, that's really, you don't really want me to do that. So, but it sounds like Jesus was doubting God. He's on the cross, he's dying. And what does he say? My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Yeah. Did Jesus have doubts on the cross? Is that possible? The Son of God, the one, so here's John, Peter, Thomas, Elijah. Oh my goodness, a pity party. Oh, woe is me, just kill me, God. I'm going to crawl into this juniper bush here and just die. Right. And so God fed him and tried to encourage him. He wouldn't be encouraged. And finally God had to slap him around and send somebody over and say, hey, I've got 7,000 that haven't bowed to Baal. Right. Pay attention to me. So sometimes God will get stern in his correction to wake us up, and we can realize that what we're doing is not a healthy doubt or a healthy fear, but his goal is to, get us to start responding. So ultimately, I'm not going to have time to cover everything, but here's what ends up happening. When you get down into, you can start even back in Leviticus. I think it's Leviticus 19:18. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. We've got that. We've got love the Lord thy God with all thy heart. We've got Peter, above all things that have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. You start looking through 1 Peter, and there's all kinds of stuff in there. So charity is the Elizabethan word for love. What did we learn in John? Let's see here. It was John that said, we'll jump over to Paul. In Romans 13, no man anything, but love one another, that he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. We've just got verse after verse about love. Paul says in Corinthians, now abideth faith, hope, love, and charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. So the greatest is love. And then I'll just wrap up with this thought, in I think it's John 4. What does it say that love casts down? Love casts down fear. And it's that fear of something that we don't have the right confidence in God. And so sometimes we have to back up and just say, you know what? I'm doubting right now, God. I'm insecure. I'm dealing with depression. I'm dealing with anxiety. I don't know why my kids are doing that. I don't know why my parents are doing that. I don't know why my company's doing this. I don't know why my finances are doing this. I don't understand why all this is coming against me, and you're not here. You're not helping me out. You're not bailing me out. I want to know what's going on, and he's not giving me the right answer. Well, that's not a time to have blind faith where you're just like, okay, whatever, this must be your plan for me. That may not be what you need to do. You may need to buckle down and say, God, I'm serious. I don't understand. I'm willing to do something here. I'm willing to engage people. But you know where we can find help every single time is God's people. We are commanded to love one another. And so if you have doubts, if you have fears, if you have things that are absolutely overwhelming and you can't bear it, you feel like I can't engage, I don't even know what to do, I don't even know how to pray right now. I guarantee you, if you will reach out to somebody that is connected, if they're following the command of Jesus, if they're following the command in the Old Testament, and they recognize that getting your love to one another is essential to your success in your existence as a Christian, you will find encouragement there. And God does not always wipe the doubts away, but he will encourage you. He will pull you out of the water. He will say the right things to you. He will cause healing. He'll say, when you say, I believe, help my unbelief, he says, okay, I can help with that. So I felt like, to me, as a skeptic, I get so tired of people just saying, it's okay, that's God's plan for you. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm questioning a lot here, and I think God's saying, that's okay. Be like the Bereans. Ask God. Petition him. The widow, the unjust judge, she kept coming to him. Well, that story, in and of itself, that could be a valuable thing, in that we can go to God and say, just repeatedly, over and over and over, and say, I'm doubting, I'm questioning, I don't understand. And at some point, he may respond to how we want, but he may not. But if we lean to his people, we will get that immediate comfort, that immediate engagement, that immediate response. And his people, they're in places you don't expect them. I've found that repeatedly, where I least expected to find somebody to encourage me. And I've got other stories, maybe in the future, if this wasn't too discouraging or disappointing, I can share them. But I've really felt like a lot of people and I use the term loosely, in Christian circles, do not validate real doubts that people have. And I think that that's important for us. When somebody comes in and they have a doubt, don't just say, it's okay, it's God's plan. Although I do believe God has a plan. So I'm not dismissing God's plan for us. But I think that sometimes we are scared of the boogeyman in the closet or the monster under the bed, and it's because we don't understand what we're afraid of, something that's not real. So we need to back up and be afraid of the things that are real and say, God, what am I searching my heart? Am I searching those around me? Am I actually loving other people? If you actually, that's the solution to a lot of problems. If people that are dealing with depression and anxiety, and I've dealt with my own fair share of problems, is if you will find a way to help somebody else, you will be amazed at how much better you feel. You'll walk away and say, wow, I went there to help that person, but I actually feel better. I went there hungry, and I'm walking away full. I went there in need, and I'm walking away with more than I had when I got there. So I definitely encourage you to recognize that those doubts can be very healthy doubts, and if you channel it the right way and use the love, instead of contrasting doubt with faith, contrast it with love. And anytime you're feeling doubt, look for the love. Look for they say that in the detective things, follow the money. Well, if you follow the love with God, and you start looking for the trail of people that are willing to sacrifice themselves, willing to give to those that are around them, you'll find the love of God, and you're like, that's where God is. That's my source to draw strength from when I'm feeling weak. So I hope that was encouraging to you guys, and thank you for letting me share that.